What's going on, everyone? Stocks with Kenny here today. We're here live. Hope you guys have a great week. It's Friday, June 2nd. I had some announcements before I get into the video. This video is going to be about the difference between public school and private school and which will create a better education, essentially, right? And here's a common stat most people should know, I believe. 70% of kids are educated in the public school system. And some of the debate you'll see here has been done since the 80s, like 1986. And some of the things that Thomas Sowell, and that's a tag team right there, Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman. I wouldn't want to be on the other end of that debate. But I digress. Let me know in the replay if you're watching this on a replay, or just comment below. Do you guys prefer me to have timestamps in my live streams or not? Just something I've been wondering, just to see if it helps. But enough rambling from me. Let's dive in. Oh, play button didn't work. My bad.
The resolution: we should move towards privatization, including the schools. Speaking for privatization is foreign line host William F. Buckley Jr., Nobel laureate Milton Friedman, and economist Thomas Sowell, both senior research fellows at the Hoover Institute, Stanford University. Speaking against privatization are Albert Shanker, president of the American Federation of Teachers, Paul Starr, Pulitzer Prize winner and professor of sociology at Princeton University, and Bill Honig, Superintendent of Public Schools for the state of California.
Hopefully I don't get copyrighted for that. But what's up, Leatherface? I appreciate the support. And yeah, Thomas Sowell is everything. But Thomas Sowell, to me, he should be way more known than he is now. I don't understand how people I don't know. I don't understand how you can host Black History without him. It's baffling we don't know more about him. Hey, Jonathan Fields, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Appreciate it. Don't worry about it. So I just wanted to do that just to give it a little timestamp in between. And let's get back into the video. Should our schools be privatized? If you're watching this on the replay, let me hear your thoughts, by the way. You think school systems should be privatized? You think the school system, do you think American education would improve with school systems being privatized or not? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. But I digress. Let's continue with the video.
Mr. Buckley, one of the benefits is private choice, but one of the problems with choice, especially in a democracy, is that public schools and private schools have always tried to open doors for students, to give them something their families might not be able to give them on their own. And if you have a system that magnifies or accelerates the differences in this society right now, which increases those differences by allowing pure choice, by allowing marketing to individual interest, where are we going to be assured that somebody is responsible for transmitting some sense of common values, or the glue that holds us together, what this democracy is all about? How do we assure that we don't just fragment?
So there's an interesting point that he made here, to saying that, hey, if we let everyone have essentially privatized education, we'll have a fragmented society. But imagine 70% of public school kids are taught in public school, and we still have a fragmented society. And one of the reasons I believe is that public school, whether they want to admit it or not, transmit values to our kids, right? There's a stat out there that the average parent only spends 30 minutes without accounting for TV, bathing, or what, only 30 minutes on average that people spend with their kids. That means most of the time your kids is with the public school education, and whatever the public school education system is teaching your kids, those are the values your kids will adopt. And the Democrats already made it known that they're fighting for your kids, essentially, right? A famous socialist once said that he who controls the children controls the future. And what they're pushing in our public education currently right now, the government funded monopoly on education, what they're doing right now, they put in New York, they're putting $250,000 towards transgender education. These are the values they're trying to instill in your kids. Social emotional learning. And they wonder why people like me in Florida, we vote in Ron DeSantis and tell Ron DeSantis, yeah, stop the woke. Florida's where the woke comes to die. Yeah, I agree with that, because end of the day, The public school system came out and said, oh, we don't want to teach Christian values in public school because we'll alienate everyone else that doesn't believe in God. But you're pushing almost an atheistic view onto our children, making essentially excluding religious people. What about Muslims? You're not teaching, you're not open, technically your system's not open to their religious belief, are you? Like, it's the same argument that conservatives are making. That, hey, you pushing for something. You're not making something objectively, oh, it's welcoming for everyone. No. You're artificially creating standards to oppose against other people. You're still excluding a group. I'm just making a mention of that. There's a reason why since the Bible came out of the public school system, you saw a sharp decline in religious people. People were identifying themselves as religious. That's an argument saying that, hey, you're pushing a specific worldview on the American populace. And then when we start reaping the negative effects of that, mass shootings, people in the high levels of depression. So, hey, I digress, man. I digress. Let's continue.
To tell you the truth, Mr. Tony, I see a lot of hypocrisy in the positions about the public schools as publicly expressed by, for instance, representatives of the NEA. Let's take a recent example, shall we? They always say, well, religion is something that should be taken care of at home. Under the circumstances, it has no place in the classroom. Then a few weeks, months, years go by, and they say, now, of course, there's a thing called sex education. Sex education isn't being taken care of at home, so we got to take care of it here. 60 Minutes last Sunday was full of the responsibilities of public education to teach 13-year-olds how not to become pregnant on the grounds that it wasn't being taught at home.
And this is a two-way problem. Sorry, I'm pausing too much. This is a two-way problem because as parents, we kind of gave away too much. We kind of delegated too much responsibility to the schools, to the public school systems, to the point where now public school systems are encroaching more and more on things that it used to be left up to the parents. Teaching your kids about sex ed was something the parents used to do. But now teachers feel comfortable teaching your kids these stuff to the point where now teachers are saying, no, when they're here, they are kids. And you almost like the teachers and parents are at war over who gets to instill their values into their kids. As a conservative, my position is that I'm the only one who has the rights to instill values into my kids, and people who are around my kids are people that I allow them to teach the values that I want them to get. You're not allowed to arbitrarily decide on a whim. I want to give your son a phone. You can't give my son a phone. I don't. In my house, my kids don't have phones. Oh, you're tyrannical. Oh, you're controlling. That's my right. If I have authority over my kids, I'm also responsible for them. Because if something goes awry with my kids, that's on me. If my kid acts on bad information given by you, the teacher, he won't be able to come back and see you and hold you accountable for giving him bad information. But if I give my kids bad information, they could always find me. I'm always going to be in their life as long as I'm alive. That's the reason why parents should be allowed to teach their kids their values over than some arbitrary teacher in public school. But yeah, I digress.
So really, what the philosophers of public education are saying to us is, we want to teach people what we're really interested in. We're not interested in religion. We couldn't care less whether they get religion back home.
Yeah, exactly.
But we are interested in sex education, so we'll teach them that.
Yeah, arbitrary picking and choosing what you want to teach the kid or not. And this is the same thing with woke education, with CRT, African American studies. You cherry pick what you want to teach to the kids, but then the minute the parents say, hey, we want to advocate these values to be taught in school. Oh no, we shouldn't allow these specific topics in public education, but you allow transgenderism, you allow critical race theory. Even if it's not called critical race theory, you allow these concepts to be taught to our kids because you value them as being important. So shouldn't Christians be able to advocate for biblical principles and perspectives into the classroom as well? Since it's public education, since it's government funded, you'll take Christians' tax money to fund these public schools, but you don't want their input into public schools. Taxation without representation. What happened to that? But liberals will come in and say separation of church and state. It's baffling to me. So you let ideology, wokeness, which if you look at it, if you judge wokeness as a religion, it hits all the qualifications. You're allowed to teach those things in school. But God forbid someone prays on a sporting event. God forbid someone mentions something about Jesus or Christ in a classroom. What happened to free speech? But hey, this is why a lot of parents like me were fighting so heavily for school choice, because we want the options to put our tax monies and let it follow our children. just like I do with food stamps. This is why the Democrats have no argument against the school choice. And if the Republicans were smart, they'll push on this very heavily in the 2024 primary run. But I digress.
I say, let us remember that the parents ought to remain dominant in these matters, and that it is they who ought to be able to select those schools that transmit those values concerning which they feel most ardently.
Well, let me respond as one educator with a very definite philosophy, and that philosophy is that the schools are responsible for transmitting our basic beliefs and values in this country, and that is one. Let me finish, please. And that is one of our objectives. And the question is, how effectively do we do that? We think that the role of religion in the creation of this country, the biblical tradition, all of that should be studied in school.
If you're telling me that we suffer in America from the notion that there is no academic responsibility to forward values, then I welcome your reiteration of the thesis of a book I wrote 35 years ago called The Superstitions of Academic Freedom, in which I pointed out that the notion that a teacher shouldn't say that the Declaration of Independence is a superior document to Marx's manifesto, because academic freedom takes a position that no positions are finally validated, is simply incorrect. But we live in a pluralist society, and people have a right to search out schools that seek to forward their values, and Mr. Sowell and I want to make this mechanically possible.
Fine.
Yeah, I agree with that, because one of the why I'm so for privatized education in a sense is that you see the results when you compare the public school to private school. Public school underperforms compared to every other option. Less than charter school, less than homeschooling. There's an incentive out there that say, hey, let's try a different way. 70% of the kids are taught in public school. Public school, the government essentially monopolizing public education, teaching 70% of the kids a failing option. And we were, and in the 80s, they were saying this. They saw the problems with education already. Underperforming. But you think bureaucrats will listen to anyone? No, because they have their own vested interest in keeping the system the way it is. Because they ultimately want control. They want to guide the youth and help them frame their worldview into a certain particular path. And they don't want people to have a say in that. They just want bureaucrats to have a say in that. And this is why state-run stuff is so inefficient, is because since it's not their money being used, they can't effectively deploy those resources to actually get the outcome that they claim they're seeking for. This is why they're always begging for more tax money to fund these public schools. But to me, for public schools, the funding is not the issue. It's the process, it's the procedure, it's the way they go about teaching education is the problem. And the only way you can disrupt public education is to competition, capitalism. And this is one of the reasons why I want some privatized options. And with school choice, it makes it easier. It creates an incentive structure for businesses to do what they do best, and that's to create a better product and services. Leverage capitalism to get the ends you want. Everyone knows, everyone is in agreement that school choice increase public education quality. When a private school opens up near a public school, it's demonstrable difference that the quality of education in that area rises up because you introduce what? Competition. Especially in a high net worth area. But people want to still make it, oh, it's a funding issue. It's a funding issue. No, like to me, funding public education at this point is like throwing money at fire. But I rambled to enough today. I digress. Let's get back into the video.
But we don't have to pay for it.
I would like to know whether you'd place any requirements on those private schools that could accept the vouchers of students. That is, would you permit a school that does not accept some children on the basis of religion? They're religious schools and they want to keep members of their own religion there.
You know, that's the old Bob Jones business. I think that if there is a sect that reads the Bible and comes to conclusions with which I disagree, I would yield to their right to interpret their religion in their own way.
That's not the question, whether they interpret their religion. The question is whether if they exclude children on the basis of the child's religious affiliation, whether you would permit a voucher to be spent in that school.
That's sort of a false question in a sense, because in many of the Catholic schools in the ghettos.
I'm not talking about those schools that do accept
Well, wait a minute.
everybody.
Let me make the statement.
Damn, bro. Like, yo, let the man talk. I'm more than talking, keep positive. But it's interesting how he's trying to corner them into, shouldn't schools be accepting of everyone? Like, they keep trying to go with this access point. And I think that's what they're trying to make the claim for a public school. Access. And to me, access doesn't matter as much as quality. Is it good to have access to a failing school if you're not going to learn anything? Oh, at least you went to school. Yeah, but it was a failing school. I didn't learn much in that failing public school. But all it matters is access. That's all that matters. And even if private school have a standard where they're saying, hey, you have to believe these religious values for you to come into the school, or you have to abide by certain standards that we place upon you. Most private schools have that. You have to have a certain GPA or else your kid gets kicked out of the school. You must dress a certain way or your kid gets kicked out of school. Every business is entitled to have their standards, right? And instead of creating systems where we have to lower the standards for our kids, how about we make our kids strive for those standards? Standards inspire people to rise to the occasion, not fall, like make the standards fall to their level. It creates a level of incompetence in our children. And this is what's going on. This is why, even if you fail through class, I forgot what bill it was, No Child Left Behind. The worst thing to happen in our public education, because you remove standards from public education. And the reason why I also want privatized education is also that it gives us a different path of doing things, a different avenue, because we saw it. Like, no one knew they needed Netflix until Netflix was created. It's the same thing with privatized education. If a privatized education system arise and they have a new innovative way of educating kids and it revolutionized education, we better for it, even if it doesn't accept everybody. And the good thing about privatized education is that more of these things will pop up. So if you don't get accepted in one school, you can go to the other. I can make the same argument for college. Why doesn't Yale accept everybody? That's not access. Now, people may say, that's because it's a college, Kenny. It's not a public education system. But what's the point of the access point this dude's trying to do? He's trying to quarter them saying, what about access for private schools? So what? A private business is entitled to they have the freedom to sell and freedom not to sell. But I digress, man.
Then you can deny everybody. You can deny it or comment. The fact is that in many Catholic schools across this country, the majority of kids attending are Protestants, and that's especially true in the ghetto areas.
But those were not the schools that, all right, so you don't want to answer that question.
No, those are the majority of the private schools.
Let me emphasize that those of us who want to privatize, who want to have public institutions be controlled by their customers rather than by the politicians. We all want public institutions, and I insist the real issue is government versus private, not public versus private. Those of us who want the institutions that serve the public to be controlled by the customers are not in any way suggesting that the people who work for government institutions are lazy, inefficient, bad, or anything like that. It is not a criticism of the people. It's a criticism of the system. Someone came up to me in the intermission and said, I was a postal worker for 30 years. I worked hard. Of course he did. The individual postal workers, many of them, I won't say all of them, it's not true in private business either that all of them, but the great bulk of individual government employees are doing their very best to do their job. But the institutional arrangements under which they work make it impossible for them to do a good job.
Ooh.
It's the system that's at fault, not the people.
I agree. The reason why the system's at fault is because think about it. Whenever government manages something and is not directly affected by the inefficient costs, for instance, government don't work off of profit loss. They just get money. They just pull money from the citizenry and they use it. Now, regardless if the money or resources are used in an effective manner, doesn't matter to the government, because they're like, hey, we gave $50 million to the public school education. Okay, but minority students have a 0.7 GPA in this school. Public school kids don't have the same educational outcomes as private school and homeschool kids. And homeschool kids, the average cost of homeschool is like $600 a year, compared to what we spend about $6 $6,500 of taxpayer money per kid in public school, and you get a worse off result than a home stay-at-home mom who teaches her kid at home. It's baffling to me. That's crazy. So you spend almost 100 times the money? No, sorry, you spend about 10 times the money with taxpayer funding to get a lesser quality education than a kid can get at homeschool. Make it make sense. You can't make that make sense. This is why capitalism works. This is the most compelling argument for privatized education. This is why we fight for school choice. Hey, let's create a program. We put the money in the people's hands and let the people decide how that money should go. Because people are more knowledgeable of their specific situation and are able to deploy the funds more effectively than a government bureaucracy so far away from them. I know what's best for my kid. I know based on various factors, if my wife can stay at home and educate my son, or we have to send a public school, or if I have the means to make up the rest of the money. I know exactly my situation better than some bureaucrat all the way in Washington knowing what to do with my money. Oh, just put them in this school. Even though hearing in this school I go to, this public school in my area is not good. The teachers are no good, whatever. I'll know more about the teachers than some far off bureaucrat in the government. This is why government are inefficient with funds. This is the biggest argument for limited government. The government should stay out of the private sector because they don't know, they're not good at resource management. The best example of the misuse of government resources is the government spent, I forgot how much money. All I'm going to say is the government spent more money to put a rocket into space, and it was only good enough for one trip. Elon Musk, with less money, was able to send a rocket, and the rocket was reusable. Capitalism at its best. You, as a government, you're supposed to be create an incentive structure where people are able to better utilize the opportunities they've been given. So put the money in the hands of people who will be more resourceful with it, aka private citizens. If something's going to directly affect the individual, give the money to them in their hands. They do that with food stamps. They don't go, oh, we decide what food you should eat, because they don't know everyone's diet. Just like they don't know everyone's educational needs. So this is my argument for school choice. This is why I voted for school choice. This is why I want school choice. Because whether you homeschool, private school, and even if you end up going to public school, you're better educated to deploy the resources better than the government can. But hey, I digress. I'll let them finish their point.
You had a dramatic example of this recently in Britain, where a government...
Hey, Base Zoomer, sorry about that. I didn't realize you was in the chat.
...owned trucking company, a transport company, was privatized, in this case by having the workers buy it, by a buyout, what we call a private buyout. That company had been losing heavily before. It is now making a very fine profit, and the shares in that company have something like quadrupled or quintupled. The same people, but the incentives were very different in operating. So I do not mean to criticize school teachers or postal service employees. On the contrary, what I want to do is to have a system under which they can do their job. I have had any number of school teachers who have complained that with the kind of administrative guidance they get from Mr. Honig and his fellow civil servants, it is very difficult for them to do their job.
I'm in the camp of, and this is why I like Vivek so much. I'm in the camp of abolishing the Department of Education, because they've done They've done a bad job with our education system. The public school education, as it's currently is constructed, does not deserve having 70% of our kids educated in that system, bar none. Like, just objectively, look at the ACT score, SAT scores. All you have to do is go on their website and compare their test scores. On average, homeschool kids perform better than them, and guess who? And public school perform worse than charter school students, homeschooling students, and private school students perform the best out of everybody. It just like the results on paper, it don't match up. And especially they like to push this, oh, it's access for minorities. Well, public schools are the worst place to put minority students in to be educated. So you wanted us to keep throwing money in these failing schools. I don't understand. And a lot of people blame the administrators. The administration's fault that teachers don't get paid enough because the administration soak up so much of the money that they can't hire better quality teachers, and there's no incentives for the teachers to actually be good in public school because of the teachers unions and all that stuff. This is why we want to privatize. This is why I think if you're a teacher, you shouldn't be part of a union. But it's hard because the government, the Department of Education, is responsible for hiring about 70% of the teachers. So it's a hard trade-off that we'll have to make. But this is one of the things that hopefully school choice forces the education system, at least the Department of Education, to actually try to compete and get better teachers, or give the teachers resources to actually give better education to the children. But hey, I digress.
If you look at the record, the number of administrators in government schools has been going up much more rapidly than the number of teachers. The total amount of money being...
Oh, that's sorry to hear that, base zoomer. But yeah, that's how government works. Essentially, they don't, because at the end of the day, there's a budget there, regardless of what they do, and they're like, oh, you don't need all this stuff. Stuff is good enough for you, but they don't care about the quality. They just say, hey, look, we spend this much money helping people, and they spin it as a win. Because at the end of the day, government, it seems like the only interest government have is to justify its spending, even if the spending does not give any. It doesn't increase or improve the results or outcomes that they're looking for. If money equal better education in public school, then we kept spending more money today than we did in the past. But public school kids have a lower quality education than kids in the past. But we invest way more money than we did in the past. But the education quality is going down. Educational outcomes are going down. How you can justify spending money if it's in a losing effort? And this is what the government don't do. The government doesn't self-reflect and be like, hey, we increase investment, we increase monetary investment into public school, but our education is still going down. That means money was never the issue. But they'll keep this racket going because they want to keep growing the government. They want to keep justifying their spending. Look at what happened with the debt ceiling stuff that happened recently. The debt ceiling agreement. Government just want to spend money. This is why they don't want people in there that want to defund the Department of Education. This is why I want Vivek to win so much. But hey, if Trump takes up the policy of, hey, let's disband the Department of Education, that's going to be a win for me. Because I think education is truly the most important issue, especially for the future of America, the future of the country. Because at the end of the day, you're guiding the future Americans. And if you teach them nonsense, they're going to operate in nonsense. But hey, I've been rambling enough. Let's get back to the video.
The total amount of money being spent on schools has doubled, on government schools has doubled over the past 2 years, 20 years per capita. The biggest increase in that has been for administration, not for teaching.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the exact part I pointed out.
The crucial issue is, shall parents, especially those in the lower and middle income classes, have the same opportunity to choose the schools to which their children go?
I agree. Yes, they do. Just like, they want, that's the same argument for WIC, the same argument for EBTs, food stamps, rent, whatever. Oh, everyone should have a right to deserve for a house. To me, owning stuff and owning a house and have that stuff, those are privileges. But if we can justify those things, those privileges as rights, my only thing, I believe every American is privileged to a quality education. Why do the Democrats and whatever don't use the same arguments for school vouchers or school choice? Because end of the day, Democrats, 98%, no, overwhelming amount of teacher unions vote Democrat. A lot of teachers are registered Democrat. Administration's Democrat. Democrat heavily supports the Department of Education. They know that adding school choice makes the job harder for teachers. It destroys that monopoly. And one thing that I think Milton Friedman eloquate well in his book Capitalism and Freedom, he equates the government as the unnatural monopoly. Because most monopolies in capitalism system, they earn that monopoly. Amazon, it earned its monopoly on online delivery, the department type of Amazon earned its monopoly. The government doesn't earn its monopoly. It just takes money from the citizens and deploy it into whatever department it wants to, regardless or retrospective of the result. Regardless if it passes, fails, succeeds, or it doesn't matter. Oh, we're just going to keep giving this department the money, even if it's not giving the results that we're looking for because of my vested interest. Oh, I got to pay off my boys. I got to make sure that I'm helping my constituents out. And that's how it seems to me. There's a conflict of interest between the Democratic Party and the Department of Education because of the what I just listed out with the teachers unions, the teachers. The teachers don't want to compete. It's hard to fire a teacher. Look up what a teacher has to do to get fired out of the public school system. And even when they fail teaching kids properly, bad teachers still keep employment. All they do is transfer them up to another school. So it's baffling to me. They resist merit-based pay. Merit-based pay as in you'll pay good teachers more money. Bad teachers won't get paid as much. They reject that because of the unions. The unions are out to protect the weakest chain in the link. So a lot of their policies are catered to, the lower performing teachers. So there's no incentives for teachers to actually go above and beyond their job. I'm just saying. And that's all because of what? Your administration state. The Department of Education. If it was privatized, hey, just like me in the job market, if I could do a better job, if I'm a good employee and I'm not getting paid the amount of money I don't think I can go to another company that will pay me the price that I'm looking for. Teachers will have that option, but because the government has such a monopoly on public education, 70%, they employ most of the teachers. They force their standards and you have to do things their way. Oh, you got to be part of a union. Oh, you got to do things this way. Oh, we pay teachers based on this. And you have no negotiating room. But hey, I digress. I've been rambling enough.
That we in the upper and middle income classes have. That's the crucial question. And to that answer, it seems to me you must say yes. And I believe personally that you must say yes to private and religious schools as well. Mr. Honig raises a question, shall the schools transmit values? No. The values of this country, of my country, of your country, has been formed by the people who occupied it, not by school administrators, not by educationists, not by the...
Imagine in 1986 they were having this conversation. Imagine Milton Friedman was seeing the level of our school system today. He's gonna be like, what? They're teaching kids that men can be women and women can be men? Imagine telling Milton Friedman that. Hey, Milton Friedman, guess what they're teaching kids in public schools today? They're teaching men can be women. They're asking people what their pronouns are. Milton Friedman will look at you crazy. He's like, what happened? What happened? Bruh. It's not the job of the state to teach your kids their values. That's a private matter. But separation of church and state, to me, that argument is dead. Because then you can't justify to me why you're allowed to teach kids about transgenderism regardless if the parents want it or not. I thought public school was supposed to be for the general public. The general public don't agree with transgenderism, but here you are pushing it in schools, liberal teachers educating kids in it. And they want to get mad when parents want school choice. So poor families have the ability to move their kids out of schools that don't reflect their values. Freedom of association, I thought that was every American's right. And you see the hypocrisy coming out. This is liberal democracy. Oh, we're allowed to teach you this atheistic worldview. Oh, but what about all the religious people? What about all the Muslims? What about all the Christians? Oh no, F them. They're supposed to accept this worldview. And liberals can't deny this. You're teaching a specific worldview. Hey, you're supposed to view the world this way. Are you not transmitting values onto to kids? When you're talking about CRT, aren't you teaching values to kids? But God forbid, Ron DeSantis comes down, says, hey, we should teach a more patriotic education. And now you have all these liberals, these leftists, these progressives getting all butthurt over it. Y'all doing the same thing. But when the conservatives want to do it, that's when y'all want to act all like victims. Like I did. Yeah, like y'all throw rocks, hide your hands. Like you wasn't spending 50 plus years teaching an atheistic, non-religious worldview onto our populace. You got the result. Most Americans are not religious, right? There's stats out there that saying that religious people are more happy than non-religious people. So effectively, I can make the claim that public school has made America unhappy. Public school has made people depressed. That's why we have all these mental health issues. But oh no, it's the guns. Self-inflicted wounds. Long-term, like short-term problems, long-term pain. And now conservatives have a vested interest in the culture, saying, hey, we should change our culture. We should instill our values, because what the government doesn't care about gets neglected. What does the government care about right now with this administration with Biden? Transgenderism, LGBT, and what that's held in high regard in our society. Companies are falling over themselves to show how LGBTQ friendly they are, because the government has deemed these values are important in our society. And all conservatives are saying is, hey, let's switch the values into something more unifying. How about being proud of your country? Can we all agree about that? Can we all agree about that? No? Yes? We're all Americans. We're all loyal to America. We want the best for America. How about we teach a pro-American vision, pro-American values in our school? How about that? Oh, no. You're pushing values on kids, Kenny. You can't do that. But you're allowed to teach this transgenderism to our kids. You're allowed to teach a black kid that, oh, he's helpless because of his skin color. You're allowed to push those views on us. But God forbid someone comes in with the Bible and says, do unto your neighbor as you will do unto yourself. Oh, no. We don't teach that in school. It's biased, bro. I'm telling you. But hey, atheism is still a worldview. So you're allowed to teach atheism, but not like to me, it's either you do it for everybody or you do it to nobody. But hey, I digress.
We as parents should transmit values to our children. And we as parents, as citizens of our country, should in our political and ordinary activities, one with another, jointly form our values. That's what's made this country great. There wasn't any set of values dictated to the original occupants of this country. There wasn't any such simple set of values dictated to people of my generation or my parents' generation who were immigrants into this country or first-generation children. We got our values largely at home, at the school, and elsewhere. Schools transmit values, but we don't want a monopoly on the transmission of values.
And that's what public education is. It's a monopoly on transmission of values. And whoever controls that, who controls that? The Democrats. Democrats, like I told you, teachers are Democrats most of the time. School systems is Democrat. Administration is Democrat. So it becomes almost a wheel. And remember, I said in the opening of this video, a famous socialist, I'm not going to say his name, clue, he's Voldemort. Voldemort was based on him. He said, he who controls the future, he who controls the children controls the future. Okay, who controls the transmission of values in kids today? The public school education system. Why you say that, Kenny? 70% of kids are educated in the public school system, which have a heavy democratic bias. So you're being transmitted a democratic view of the world, and people wonder why young people are so I say aligned with the democratic vision of society, because we allow, for the most part, generations past, whatever. I'm not here to throw mud at anybody, but we allow these people to transmit their values onto our kids. And statistically, it's impossible to really, for most parents, to transmit their values to their kids, because like I said, the average time spent with kids is 30 minutes. Me, I'm in a blessed position where I work from home. My wife's a stay-at-home mom, and I'm able to spend my 24 hours a day with my kid with close proximity. Whenever I want, I leave this room and boom, there he is. So I'm an exception. I spend way more time than 30 minutes with my kid on average. But most Americans can't say that. So the next best thing is, hey, let's give most Americans the option to put their kids in an institution that shares their vision of the world, their values, their principles, whether that be Catholic school, a Christian school, a Muslim school, whatever. You as a parent are entitled to that. That is the case for private education. I'm sorry I've been rambling, but I got to give my take on this. I can't just keep sitting here, pick off Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman, and not give my 2 cents into it. But I digress. Let's get back into the video.
We don't want any small group of officials to have the power to say what values shall be transmitted. And yet that is what is happening now in a monopoly school system, and particularly as that school system has gotten more and more centralized. It used to be much better when you had local control of schools, because then you could have variety, diversity. But as the control of schools has moved from the local district to the city, from the city to the state, and from the state to the federal government, increasingly. The values that are being dictated are being determined by an increasingly unrepresentative selection of the population.
The slippery slope in the case of Mr. Friedman's proposal would lead toward public abandonment of financing of education. He's opposed to continuing that except in hardship cases. And I think if we get on that slippery slope, we need to see where we're sliding towards. There are a variety of other issues. I want to take up just finally the question of whether private schools have superior effects. Even if there is a private school advantage in the moment, it doesn't necessarily follow that an exodus of public school students into private schools would result in overall improvement. Just think about it. If the private school advantage comes from its greater selectivity, the greater ability of their selected students, or from the peer influence that they have been able to maintain, or because of the special commitment to education of the families who now send their kids to private schools, that advantage does not necessarily transfer to new students who would be sent to private schools under this system. Now, the fundamental...
I disagree with that, because one of the difference to me is there's a stat out there where they said like what most successful people in the world, think of the most successful people in the world, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, 80% of people like them are either only children or firstborn. And a lot of people were like, a lot of scientists were baffled, like, damn, 80% of successful people, 80% of doctors, 80% of engineers, they're firstborns or only children. How is that? A lot of these studies talk about how the fact that is the expectations can drive different values and behaviors out of the child. So if you have an expectation for the child, hey, you got to have a 3.3 GPA or else you get kicked out of the school. That's essentially going to force the child to rise, because at the end of the day, you're introducing a negative outcome. And from my experience, and I think from a psychology, I forgot what study I read this for, but from psychology, people are more motivated by negativity than positivity. So if there's a negative consequence, hey, you're going to get kicked out of this good school and you're going to inconvenience your parents. If you get kicked out of it, it raises your level of performance to the standard driven by the school. In public school today, they virtually have no standards anymore, right? Kids can be disruptive in class, which scientifically, there's been studies where disruptions in class affect the learning of everybody around, right? And to me, it's not a money problem that public schools have that's driving the quality of education. It's the procedure. It's a process problem. It's the way they go about educating kids is the problem, right? They don't hold standards anymore. They don't kick out disruptive kids, which affects the education of other children. Right? They do. Oh, you can turn in you don't have to turn in your black kid. You don't have to. They teach kids different standards. They're scared of correcting kids nowadays. This DEI stuff this wokeness is infecting public school to the point where they don't even want to give test scores anymore. The teacher unions, I remember I read an article. The teacher unions now, they're trying to remove grading standards. So I'm like, oh, so public school, you're trying to remove the ability for me as a parent to judge your ability, your performance of teaching my kids the material, because you want to remove grading standards. You think this is going to slide in public school? No. And even if a public school do decide to do that, parents can move, who have the means, can take their kids and put them somewhere else. Let the competition decide, because the only way the quality of education rise if there's competition. But this guy will sit here and have you believe, oh, if we just remove the need for public school, private school is going to be diluted. No, it's not, because public schools still exist. Like they said, the tax dollars should follow the kid. This is why we want school choice, because people who believe in privatized education, we saw this already. It's not going to defund the public schools. It's not going to steal resources. And I hate that word they use, steal. What do you mean steal? It's tax money coming from the community. Property tax pays for most of the education. State taxes technically pay for most of the school districts. So it's our money anyway. So what do you mean by, the private education is stealing funds from public school? It's a non-argument. It's a non-starter in my view. Because if I didn't exist, if the families weren't there, you wouldn't have the tax money to fund the stuff in the first place. All we asking is for, give us more responsibility over the tax dollars, school choice. But hey, let's let him finish his point. That's just a little diatribe. I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I gotta get my points in.
The fundamental assumption of Mr. Friedman, as he sketches it in his book, is that the benefits of education are fully captured by the individuals receiving it. In other words, that private benefit equals social benefit, and hence there's little justification for any governmental subsidy for schooling. But this misses a great deal. It presumes more perfect information, more perfect markets than currently exists, and it neglects the significance of the cultural and political benefits that education produces.
Sorry, Base Zoomer, I wanted to respond to that. Yeah, I understand the quality of private school will be diluted, cannot be maintained. For instance, if the worst and rowdiest of public school kids attend, well, public school can still avoid this problem because at the end of the day, public school are still entitled to their standards, right? Just like if I'm a man and I go to a women's only gym, is that woman's only gym's right to deny access to me, right? I can't like access the private institution, and if I feel some type of way about it, I take my money and go somewhere else to a male only gym or LA Fitness somewhere. Right, it's the same concept. Like public schools should still be able to maintain its quality because at the end of the day, it still has its standards, and which was the point I was making before in my rant, is that you force the kids to rise to a particular standard or else risk getting kicked out. Right? This private school, I noticed, have higher behavioral requirements, higher behavioral standards. Academic standards. More, they require higher levels of etiquette. So those rowdier kids, filter themselves out of the school because they won't be able to stay there long. That's what I'm just saying. So because at the end of the day, class disruption is a big component to why students' education gets lower education, because these rowdy kids are allowed to interrupt the kids that are actually trying to learn. Right, but I just wanted to share that. I think I felt like I answered it already, but let's hear this guy finish his point.
That public schools produce and that are not reflected in economic transactions. As a democratic society, we require an educated people capable of carrying the responsibilities of self-government. As a society knit together from very different threads, we need a system of education that helps to instill a sense of national identity and that weakens the force of racial and religious divisions. That is the reason we have had public schools, and it is an ideal worth fighting for.
One of the interesting things whenever you propose change is that people say you cannot guarantee that this or that will happen. You can never guarantee that anything will happen when you change anything. And if we really follow the logic of that, we would all be living in caves today.
Hey, that's a good point, right? Like how you know all this is going to happen until we actually try it. This is the 80s. They thought welfare will help lift people out of poverty. 50 years, 60 years later, you look at welfare and all it did was make people comfortable in poverty, right? But the assumption was, if we give these poor women money, they'll be able to stay on their feet and actually be able to get themselves out of poverty. But no, what you did, you created an incentive where people will feel comfortable being in the level they're at. They don't have to strive for more because they're being taken care of at the current level because of the government subsidies, because of the social programs. You killed the person's incentives to actually strive for more because they're comfortable staying where they at. If you can maintain your standard of living without working, would you do it? A lot of people will say yes to that. And this is a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. But hey, I digress, man. I'll continue. Let Thomas Sowell finish.
The argument that this is all a matter, there will be no guarantee of improvement as the mix of students going to the private schools changes, ignores the fact that the parents will be monitoring all of this. And we needn't argue about and speculate as to what might happen. They will have the choice when the time comes. I see a complete evasion on the other side here of the question of incentives. It's not a question of how we're going to drain the public schools of all its students. It's a question of what is going to happen when you have competition not only across public schools, but between public and private schools. Now, if you think that the people who run the
what happens when, let's say you're right, and private schools are successful, you do get some to come over, the incentives have worked. What happens to the other 60 or 70% of the students who are left in the regular schools? What guarantees do you have?
So one of the arguments that like Christopher Rufo, and he's a big advocate for school choice. I should start doing videos with his content too. is that he makes the argument that public school education will actually rise because they'll have less students to worry about, right? Because the biggest gripe that public school teachers always talk about is it's 1 to 34 ratio. There's for every one teacher, there's 34 students. We're overwhelmed, overworked. That's why we can't work as well, or why the quality of education is so low, because our attention is divided amongst a lot of students. While homeschooling kids, they only got to worry about their kid, and this is why the quality of education is so high. That's an argument I heard before from a public school teacher. Right. And this is a blessing in disguise. Less students going to public school. That means this is smaller class size. Smaller class sizes, they show it in junior colleges compared to university. People prefer junior colleges more than university because of the smaller class size. It feels more intimate learning. This is why one-to-one is a better way of transferring information than in a group setting, because it's harder to give specific attention to individuals in a group setting than more of a one-on-one session. So with smaller class sizes, that should increase the public schools education quality. This is why no one can argue with school choice that school choice will drive and increase the quality of education. But a lot of the counterpoints that a lot of people who are against privatized education is that they need of someone needs to be held accountable, or they use the access point. Oh, how the kids are going to get there, how the kids are going to be. Like they make an access point when there is no access point to be actually made. I think they're just creating problems in their head. They're suffering from imagination is what I'll say, but I digress. Whew. No, okay, so before I go on, let me look at some of the comments. No, I do agree with your point. This is from Base Zoomer. The character limit often makes me send my thoughts. Okay, yeah, okay. I understand. Thank you, Base Zoomer. Mellowcat, if that depends on what the student is difficult, in what way they are difficult. Some have hidden learning disabilities that need greater attention. Some are just poor mannered, and no environment change outside of parenting changes and discipline will fix that. I agree with that. And another good thing about privatized education is that public schools are not equipped to really give great quality education to students with learning disabilities, right? Because I know there's some schools where they specialize in blind students, and if people it was a story I read. A kid was blind and he couldn't function. Like public school didn't have the means to actually cater to him, because in a public school you cater to the majority, not the minority. That includes learning disability kids. Now, some public school teachers will say, no, we have resources for public school for kids with learning disability. But I always fear that a private school will be better equipped to handle a kid with learning disabilities, especially if there's a lot of resources going into that private school. That's just how the economy works, right? And there's probably schools specialized for kids with learning disability. You can have a school that's just blind kids, and it's going to be a smaller setting. Public schools, they can't use all those resources just for a specialized segment of people. It's impossible for a public school to niche themselves down to cater to one specific group of people. But a business can specify for one specific group of people. You see businesses niche themselves down. There's gyms that only cater to women. There's gyms that only cater to men. There's gyms that only cater to bodybuilders, because businesses have the ability to niche down. Public school education can't do that because they're too general. So is another interesting point too, that privatized education can cover as well. Hey man, I'm on a roll today, but maybe I feel like I've been rambling too much. But hey, I digress. Let's continue with the video.
That the education for
I
them
thought we dealt with guarantees. Guarantees are
you have
incompatible
to
with
guarantee
freedom.
it because we have a system right now that educates 40 million children. If
Your
we're
system
wrong
guarantees
about this,
nothing except falling scores for years after years, which you and which
we
the
have
establishment.
sacrificed this nation.
Get him, Thomas. Get him.
Not something to take lightly, and guarantees are important, or at least a good chance that this is
Guarantee.
So this guy who's advocating for public school, he rather that kids are in school and doesn't care if they're actually learning anything. That's his argument. That's a lot of what public school teachers are saying. Oh, at least they're there. We're pretty much, public school has become daycare. All we care about is the kids are actually in the school. It doesn't matter if they're actually learning math. It doesn't matter if they actually learn how to read. It doesn't matter. This is why minority students they do the worst in public school. This is why minority students do better in charter school, private school, but they fight so hard against charter school. Thomas Sowell has accurately and has done research extensively on this, how New York and the Democrats and the Democratic Party in New York go out of their way to try to destroy charter schools, even though charter schools are better for everybody. especially minorities. But they want to keep pushing, oh, school access. We're educating 40 million kids badly, inefficiently. But instead of creating a better option to give the kids better education, no, they need access. We need to babysit them. Yo, what's the purpose of public school? Is it to teach or to babysit kids? I don't know. That's just me. Maybe I'm just too strict as a parent. I don't know.
That cannot be redeemed is not important.
I think we do disagree on one basic point. I think a society that sets up an educational system that doesn't devote attention to transmitting its basic beliefs in democracy, in freedom, in character, is a society doomed for failures.
Boy, if he saw 2023, he'll be wrong on his face. That, yeah, you can make the claim, oh, yeah, it's here to produce pro-American values. But if the wrong set of people get in there, it can try to transmit other values. And that values could be transgenderism. You should look at people based on the color of their skin. CRT. Oh, you're a white kid, you're an oppressor. You're a black kid, you're a victim. It doesn't matter if that white kid's poorer than you, black kid. He has more privilege than you, even though you come from a rich family. Even though if your name is Bronny James, I'm supposed to sit here and believe that this white kid over here, some random white kid that nobody knows, his parents ain't famous, he has more privilege than Bronny James because Bronny James is black and this random white kid is white and he has more privilege than Bronny James. Craziness, right? But that's the transmission of values that this guy is talking about. This is why I say you don't let liberals emotionally manipulate you, because this is what they do to you. They'll gaslight you into a certain position. Oh, you don't care about kids? But then you ask them, hey, I'm concerned about this. Can't give you answers. Deflect, ignore. But I'm pretty sure, Thomas Sowell and Friedman will get them. I believe in them.
Is committing cultural suicide. I think we can see the results of that system, and our question is how best to remedy it.
And you mean that the U.S. committed cultural suicide in the first 100 years of its existence?
I don't agree with your reading of the first 100 years. If you go back and read educational history, they did have a very clear vision of what they wanted to transmit to their students. They had them.
And think about it this way. Who was it? Wasn't it Carnegie? A businessman started the public school because he wanted workers to be trained to be workers. So essentially, your public school is only training Americans to be workers. You're trying to put them in a specific box. See, if I was in charge of education, I'll try to cater the society more to be more entrepreneurs, job creators, right? Because that's what a country needs, right? Businesses, enterprise, and naturally employees will spring out of it. So even the first 100 years that this guy's trying to make an argument for, it was started by a businessman. It wasn't even their idea in the first place. But then, the government came in and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to standardize this stuff. The public school system is so outdated that it's still doing the same procedures that it did in the 1800s. Baffling. You're still teaching the same way in the 1800s. Now, technology came, disrupt a little bit. I was graduating high school when Khan Academy came out. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Base Zoomer might know what Khan Academy is. But Khan Academy revolutionized the game. Teachers couldn't teach math right. Khan Academy came out. Kids were learning math like this. I bet you if you only homeschool on Khan Academy, you'll be smarter than kids going to public school. I bet you. Try it out. Test it out. That's one of the options I was considering when I want to homeschool my son. Hey, I'm going to use Khan Academy. Get a better quality education online than a public school. Craziness. I digress.
Guthrie readers, it was a very
Of course, but it was the parents who transmitted.
It was the school that reinforced it. It was the school that enhanced it. And it was the school that brought up these higher ways of looking at democratic issues.
The issue before us is one of great importance. It's not just an issue of ideology. It's an issue of the kind of country and society we're going to have. When the first person retired on Social Security in this country, there were 17 people in the workforce supporting that person. Only a few years from now, we will come to a different situation, one in which for every person on Social Security, there will only be 3 people in the workforce, and one of those 3 will be black or Hispanic. If our society does not do a more effective job than it's doing now, we'll have 2 people working one supporting someone on Social Security, and one supporting another person who is dependent on public funds, with the result, of course, being disastrous for everyone. We have had in this country a system which has worked over 200 years.
Worked according to what standard? That's what I want to know. According to what standard? Education quality is going down. Our kids don't even, if you ask a random Gen Z person, what year was the country founded on? They won't be able to tell you. If you ask them basic math questions, they won't be able to tell you. And this was in the 1980s. 2020s is even worse. To me, this validated Thomas Sowell's assertion that, hey, these schools are failing. They need to change something. And the bureaucrats, they don't want to change nothing. They want to keep everything the same. All they want to do is they think just throwing more money at a problem will fix it. But I digress.
A system in which most people have been proud and which did go astray in the 1960s and which is being turned around at the present time. We're now being asked to embark on a great experiment, to pull apart this system, to have many millions of children leave the public schools and go into private schools.
As long as they are free to choose, if I may coin a phrase, there is no reason why, if the private school is the worst thing in the world, the parents, the kids will be any worse off, because they can always stay with the system we have.
Exactly. Like, being for private education doesn't necessarily mean that public school education is going to go away, right? Because it's the same way Sweden's doing with their healthcare system. They're privatized certain parts of their healthcare system to make the system more efficient. And this is the same argument for privatized education. This is the same argument for school choice. We're going to make the current system more efficient. That's it. We want to increase the quality of the education. We want to introduce competition because right now there's an unnatural monopoly with government funded schools. An astute observation from Thomas Sowell. Right? Parents should be free to choose. Parents shouldn't be pigeonholed to a public school because they don't have the financial means to put their kids in a better school. What sounds better for a student? They have a higher quality of education or access to a bad education. You imagine public school, right, as it's constructed, is so bad that you as a parent will do a better job teaching your kid than the public school can. If we privatize certain parts of the education system, competition will naturally increase the quality of the product because they know, oh, if I don't do a good job teaching these kids, their parents will take them out and put them in another school. Man, I don't know. I'm going to hang out a little bit. Bruh. Public school as an institution of the government hasn't ever existed for that long. This dude's making arguments for uneducated, not hibist arguments for prosperity. No, because the way the school system is currently constructed, it didn't exist for 200 years. But there were that's why I said, I forgot who, I don't know if it was the Fords, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, but they were throwing out money to create little schools because before all this in the 1800s, most kids were homeschooled. Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, all of them, they were homeschooled. Or they had little pod schools. Like they used to go get a little get together and get taught that way. I'm starting to think pod schools will be even a better choice too. If you want some socialization for your kid. You and your neighborhood, y'all go into one house, y'all huddle up your kids and y'all educate your kids this way. This is some of the options me and my wife are looking at right now. Right? Because we want to homeschool our kid, at least for elementary school age. And then later on we'll consider like private school and all that stuff. But I don't know, man. Honestly, I'm not sure what people want to do at this point. But hey, I digress. That's been my little rant. It's been an hour. I have some announcements. I see that you guys like the inconvenient truths a lot, so I'll make that a weekly thing. Wednesdays. I think I gave a community post about that already. But what else was I gonna say? Yeah, and another announcement is, hey guys, follow me on Twitter. I have a Twitter. I'm trying to get a little bit bigger on Twitter so people will notice me when I actually tweet something. But I digress. Also, my second son is due to be born any week now. His due date is 2 weeks from now, so I may or may not be able to do live streams next week or 2 weeks from now. But I'll let you guys know if that situation changed. So I'm gonna be working my butt off to have a lot of content pre-scheduled for you guys. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Let me think. Do I have anything else? I don't think so. I think that's good. I think that's it for me. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you guys found it insightful. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Have a good weekend. God bless. I'll see you guys on the next one.